What is up, my ninjas? I'm Strident, and welcome to my review of Avengers Endgame. I'm also going to be referencing Infinity War a little bit. But to make a long story short, Agent O, Clarion Prime, and I recorded one the day after we all saw it. And then my computer crashed. I usually record my podcast or this video on my a Mac, and for some reason, I guess that was the day it was done. It was going on strike, and it decided to crash. So I lost all but 30 minutes of the recording. Um, it wasn't a 4-hour video. It was a nice hour, 45 minutes of us going through a lot of good points, and I lost it. And I'm pissed, and it frustrated the shit out of me. And we are going to do another one. But in the meantime, I'm going to give my perspective on this film. Many of you have heard, the rest of the internet's their version of what they saw and how they felt about it, and now it's my turn to speak on how I've been feeling about it. So I'm going to get into this. With me, there are spoilers, so we are going to do a ton of spoilers. If you don't like spoilers, you're in the wrong place. Leave now, because I'm gonna spoil the hell out of it like I always do. I mean, and also, come on, it's like what, a month after the movie came out, 2-3 weeks after the movie came out. By now, if you were planning on seeing this, you've already seen it. But I'm gonna jump into it. Big spoilers ahead, because that's the way I do. And let's get it on. So off the rip, as you know with me, my opinion is not the popular opinion. This movie is not the be-all, end-all. It doesn't deserve all the hype. I mean, we are 22 movies in. It's not like we're, you know, 10. It's not like we're 5 movies in. And it's amazing that we've had a connecting story for, 5 movies. It's 22. At this point, Disney's printing money. These movies are great, whether or not you know what's going on, whether or not you've been a long-term, Marvel fan and you've been reading the comics. The MCU is its own thing. It's more kind of like the abridged version, an updated, abridged version for non-comic book readers that comic book fans will enjoy, because we're seeing some distilled versions of characters that we know and we love. That being said, this movie has been essentially getting by on the hype alone, and it's not really bringing anything new. If anything, all the uh, ground groundwork that was laid by Infinity War, much of it is destroyed here. Um, I'll go through the plot real quick so that you get an idea, for those of you who don't know what's going on. But the plot is simple. Essentially, the heroes are kind of reeling from the events of Infinity War. Many of them have kind of set into what's going on. They figured out, like, this is what it is. We got to live with it. A couple things happened though. The end of Infinity War, Captain Marvel spoke with the remaining team members of the Avengers, and she knew where to go find Tony and Nebula. She rescues them, brings them back. They all form a plan, essentially, to go after Thanos, because Nebula knows exactly where Thanos went after the snap. Turns out another power signature popped up, which is similar to the kind of power that was output from the Infinity Gauntlet when he did the snap the first time. The team goes to the planet that Thanos is on, confront him. Thor chops his hand off. They find out that the gauntlet is still damaged, like worse than it was before. Thanos explains that he used the stones to destroy the stones. One thing that's a reoccurring problem in this film is that a lot of things that are fantastical and awesome and worth seeing and would be interesting to see acted out in front of you, they are told to you. They're told to the audience. We don't get to see some of the most interesting concepts and ideas and events. You know, a lot of things are just told to us. And it's frustrating because, you know, this is comics essentially being translated to screen. I mean, with some, you know, trimming of the fat, but it's still, these are comic book characters. You have a whole generation, and I understand this, of comic book movie goers who are like, they don't have to be like the comics. Well, fans, well, true believers, you're literally watching Infinity War adapted into a movie. So just stop with that. These are the comics. These are comic book stories. Even if sometimes it's just in name, you're still getting concepts and things that were fleshed out in comic books 20 years plus before this film came out. And when we get these movie adaptations, a lot of times important details that would have blown the audience away are left out due to the lack of imagination or the lack of vision that the teams working on these films tend to have. So Thanos destroyed the stones with the stones. Thor chops his head off. He's got his revenge. He doesn't feel good about it because he still lost, you know, more than half of his people. Then they head back to Earth, kind of like they won and they lost at the same time, because now they still can't fix everything. Ant-Man shows up after escaping the quantum realm. For him, he was in there 5 hours. 5 years have passed. There is a 5 years later time jump. Cap is now leading kind of like a survivors support group. Natasha is running the Avengers. Captain Marvel has come to work with the Avengers, and there's these little like knowing glances and things that she gives to Rhodey so that you get the idea that it's possible that she may know him, or she's kind of in the process, kind of like in the comics, of the two of them getting together, which is funny because the two of them don't seem to be able to stand each other in reality, which is why you probably don't see very much of them together on screen. But I'm sure, you know, if it was written into the script, they would do the damn thing. But, you know, essentially everybody's kind of rustled into their thing. But Ant-Man escapes, explains his plight. He, you know, figures out some cool things and realizes once he sees that time has moved the way that it is moving, he comes up with the plan of using the quantum realm as a way to go back in time, to go steal the stones and undo the snap. Tony has fallen out again with Cap. He's still pissed off at Cap, which is one of the dumber points that you don't really hear people criticizing very much, but it's pretty stupid. The world is ending, and you're still having beef with someone who was literally doing the same exact thing you were doing, you know, before the snap happened and you all lost people. You know, he just was on the other side of the world. You were in space, which is strange to me. But Tony's still beefing with them. He doesn't want to help them. They essentially go to Tony to ask him to help them figure out how to build something that can allow them to harness or travel through the quantum realm. Tony's like, nope, you can't do time travel. It's dumb. It's broken. These rules will be broken, and you know it'll fail because reasons. You know, Tony gives up. He kind of is like, nope, I'm gonna stay with my family. You find out Tony has, you know, he's married, Pepper, and they have a little daughter named Morgan. So then the team goes to Banner. With Banner, they figure out how to use travel through the quantum realm, go from place to place, and then come back. There's, you know, some mishaps, but they figure it out. So then they hatch this heist to go to a couple different places to get the stones. They figure out that there is a time period where all three stones are in the same three of the six stones are in the same place at the same time, which is New York, and that's during the Battle of New York from Avengers. They know they have to go to Vormir to get the Soul Stone, Morag to get the Power Stone, and Asgard to get the Reality Stone, which was the Ether. So they all decide they're all going to go. They build the suits. I'm sorry. Tony shows up. Overnight, he figures out how to time travel through the quantum realm based on some of Pym's research, but he builds essentially the time GPS and the time tunnel that they use to go in, like a giant one. Which I was like, okay, so Tony Stark is Reed Richards now. There's a big difference between robotics and a military-grade armament, experimental military-grade armament, and fucking time travel and quantum theory. You know what I mean? And multiverse travel. But for some reason, the writers think, oh, he's smart. It's the same shit. They explain this really convoluted way about the time travel, which is frustrating because they ignore theories that exist right now and theories that have been set in place from other films. They even bring up other films and say time travel never works. Don't think about it. Just, let's go with the plan. As if to tell the audience that this is where we fucked up. And if you think about it, you will notice where we fucked up. Don't think about it. Just go with it. Which pissed me off greatly because it was like, these are the films where you take those really complex or abstract science fiction, kind of hard science fiction elements or theoretical science things that show up in science fiction, and you make it feel as real as possible, and you give it to us in a very earnest kind of like believable way where we say, maybe it can't be done, but it would be awesome if it was like this. And I hear a lot of the reviews that are running around saying shit like, time travel always sucks in movies. It's a way that shit writers write themselves out of a hole. What the fuck have you been watching? That's how TV shows, bad TV shows, handle time travel. There's tons of good shows, Justice League Unlimited being one of them. There's even mediocre shows like Legends of Tomorrow and fucking good old shows like Quantum Leap. Or like Time Tracks. There is all this stuff that it's weird. You can tell that the audience, the people making these reviews, have not really watched much outside of what the usual films are. Everybody cites Back to the Future as a great one. Terminator 2 was great, even though they only realized in recent years that they had a multiverse paradox and not a time paradox, because a man sends a soldier back in time and that soldier becomes that dude's father. So it had to have been that dude's father in another timeline that was created by sending that guy back. But anyway, the rules that they come up with, and they're explained to you really well by the Ancient One when they do go back to the Battle of New York, is that if you go back in time, you cannot affect your future. Whatever you do, if you affect the past, it will create a new branching timeline. If you put back whatever you take from that timeline, and in this case it's the stones, then it will be as if, as long as you come back, to the second or a couple seconds before you left, or before you took whatever it is that you took, before you disturbed the fabric of everything, and you put things back, all is well. So that's the logic they're going with. There's no, if a building is gonna be here and you put something else here, chances are that building may not be made. Or if you went right where you previously went left, you didn't just create like a whole new future for yourself. You know what I mean? Like if you went back in time and you got the fucking, lottery information from that time period, you are not necessarily going to be a millionaire in your, your present, which is now a new future. It's a whole bunch of jacked up, but for the sake of this film, they tell you that if they go back in time and fuck with something, you create a parallel, timeline, which is really a parallel reality. But that's not how they describe it in the film. So anyway, during the 5-year jump, before you see everybody when they get the team back together, Thor's fat. He's been drinking and playing video games, hanging out with Meek and Cord, which, I love those characters, but Fat Thor, really? It's like, how many jokes can you make? You know what I mean? Like, and how much can you make one character lose? The man lost his eye, but then he gained mastery over the rest of his powers, Then he loses his people when he becomes king. He loses his brother. Then he loses, or first he loses the hammer, then his eye, then his people, then his brother. Then he just loses all hope. And damn, I even forgot. Before that, he lost his mother. And then now he's lost his physique and his will to fight. It's like, seriously, how much can you make a character fall when he actually was an ace in the hole? And I get it, to some degree. It would have been one of those things where you're making the characters who traditionally were more powerful weak so that other newer, more powerful characters can shine. But it just feels kind of like a misstep. But anyway, they all go to their respective places. Hijinks ensues. Loki manages to get the Tesseract, forcing the team that went to the Battle of New York to have to go to the 70s to get more Pym particles from a younger Dr. Hank Pym, which is strange to me because it's like, why didn't you just go to 2000, what is that, 17 or 17, when Ant-Man and the Wasp came out, and just get more from there? They go to the 70s to get more quantum, which is weird because, like, if you had one jump left, because they said they only had enough to jump in and jump out, you wasted potentially going someplace where you don't know if it's possible. You're not 100% sure that, what you just used would be there. You would be using an experimental version. Anyway, I'm thinking too hard. I'm not even going to bother with this. Anyway, they go to the 70s. Tony sees his dad. They have a heart-to-heart because he's now a father, and this is before Tony was born. Steve sees Peggy Carter, who is, she should be, because this is the 70s, which is 30 years. It's 30 years farther in the future that, after the events of Captain America, the first Avenger. And she still looks exactly the same, as if she was taking the super soldier serum, or she was frozen in suspended animation or something, which makes no sense because she would be, what, 50, maybe in her 60s, about to be in her 60s. I'll give them that. Maybe they're all in their mid-20s in the first Avenger. Okay, fine, I'll give them that. Then she would be about 50. She doesn't look anything different. She looks exactly the same as she did, in the first Avenger, which is strange because back in those days, there were very few hot women that stayed hot into their 50s. That's why women like Raquel Welch and Jane Fonda, they all stood out, because they stayed hot. Jane Fonda's hot now, and she's what, in her 70s, something like that. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of this weird, self-indulgent Tony Stark talking to his dad, giving his dad, advice, and it's just weird. And it doesn't seem like there were very high stakes with them going back there. It was very easy for them to go do their thing. Previously, when they went to the Battle of New York, they fucked shit up, and the Tesseract ends up in the hands of Loki. Loki jumps out of that reality, and it's like, oh, don't worry about it. Loki's going to get a TV show because of this. And it's just very, like, nonchalant, like, you really fucked up, but don't worry about it. It was funny. Cap fights himself, and it's kind of it's played for comedy. It's like, this is kind of stupid. Anyway, during all this, when Rhodey and Nebula go to Morag to get the Power Stone, essentially they're going to the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy 1. So you see Star-Lord dancing, but you don't hear the music that he hears. You just get to hear him singing it. So it's kind of funny to see it from a different perspective. They knock him out, get the stone, and then Rhodey goes back, and then Nebula ends up getting snatched up by Thanos from that time. So this is like 2014 Thanos and his people. 2014 Nebula, 2014 Gamora, as well as the Black Order, who didn't even exist in that film, but we're seeing them now. It's strange, you know? So anyway, because of the two of them being in the same place, their cybernetics start interfering with one another, and somehow Thanos is able to extract the whole conversation that the Avengers had in front of, well, involving Nebula, talking about where to go to get Thanos and about them getting all the stones. And it's kind of like, you know, if you're gonna go this Saturday morning cartoon bullshit route, why not just have an event happen on the, like, how do they know how to change the channel and get to the memory that matters? Why are they even remotely, you know, sharing this information? Were they sharing bandwidth or some shit? Like, it's just very coincidental and very fucking convenient so that Thanos doesn't have to, you know, 2014 Thanos doesn't have to work to figure out how to stop the good guys. And another thing you'll notice too is that this Thanos, they act like 6 years of a quest that he might have been doing most of his life makes him a completely different person, when he technically would have already been, you saw him at the end of all those Marvel movies, you know? He would have been on track to be the same Thanos that we had been seeing over and over throughout all those movies. And he had the attitude and he spoke the right way. There's really little to no reason that he would be a completely different character, if you know what I mean. Like, he would still be very much the same megalomaniacal, you know, almost force of nature that he was in the other films. He just wouldn't have the gems yet. But you'll see weird things with him, like his power levels just don't make sense, and he's just like a generic villain. He's just, I want to kill everything kind of villain. And it's weird because, you know, they did such a good job giving you a full characterization in Infinity War. Why squander all that to make Thanos a generic, you know, paint by numbers villain? It just doesn't make sense. And it feels really cheap and corny, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make you feel like, man, I understand where he's coming from. No, it makes you feel more like, man, this guy is fucking crazy, you know? And it shouldn't be like that. So, yeah, I wasn't impressed with Thanos. I thought they failed at making him, you know, a two-dimensional character. He felt like a caricature of the Thanos that we got in Infinity War. So, anyway, now Thanos knows what to do. He decides to have his Nebula switch places with our Nebula, and nobody figures this out. She plays it up perfectly. Meanwhile, Gamora is starting to have doubts because she finally is, you know, she's talking to, and which you would assume from the other films, she always was kind of, sort of, not 100% on board for the cause. You know, she was more like, what is the reason why Dad is doing this shit? Where do we really come from? What's really going on? You know what I'm saying? Like, she seems a lot smarter than what the show was letting on. But she decides to listen to, talk to Nebula, and eventually you'll see that helps turn the tide. The Avengers all succeed. Thor goes back with Rocket to Asgard. He also gets to talk to his mother, and he reaches out and takes Mjolnir, which I thought was weird, and I thought it would fuck up events that were happening later, but they said that they were going to return back to, you know, a couple moments before they left, or before they got there, something like that. You know, it would only be like they left for a second. To me, it would be like the minute you take Mjolnir from Asgard during a timeline where Mjolnir is active with Thor, it's not broken, then Thor in that time doesn't have Mjolnir. You've created another timeline where Thor lost the battle, or he won it a different way, and you have a whole different Thor in that time period. But, you know, that's me actually thinking like someone who's read comics and who's seen, you know, multiverse stuff. Like, I'm a DC fan. I like Marvel too, but I'm a DC fan first. Actually, I should say I'm a comic book fan, but I grew up more so on the DC side, is what I'm trying to say. And their every action creates a multiverse, you know, creates another reality, another universe in the multiverse. So where you went left, there's a universe where you went right. Where you went up, there's a universe where you went down. Where you're rich, there's a universe where you're poor, and so on and so forth. So this, where they go back in time and fuck shit up, and all it does is create momentary issues that they can easily just go back and put back what they took, and it makes everything good. It's stupid. So they get the ether out of Natalie Portman's mouth. If you remember, in that movie, they were trying to get the ether out of her body, and they couldn't figure out how to do it until, what's his name? What is that corny ass dude's name? Malekith. Till he figured out, and he came and just got it so he could use it for himself. He knew what to do. So it just seems very convenient that they were able to go back in time and do all this shit and not really struggle. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's bogus. That's extremely bogus. And the fact that, you know, most people are fine with this, I don't know. I don't know. That's not cool to me. So once they come back, Tony Stark builds a infinity or power glove. They put the stones together, and they have to decide who is going to use this glove. Hulk ends up being the one to use the stone or the glove. Somehow during that time period, during their time jaunt and the switch with the two nebulas, Nebula managed to get some of the Pym particles, and she also managed to open up the time thing so that Thanos could come through with his ship. And then the minute, like a couple minutes after they make the snap and they fix everything, Thanos shows up in his ship. He bombs the fucking Avengers HQ. Everyone is trapped with the exception of Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America. Those three confront Thanos, and this is essentially what sets the stage for the final battle. Now, something that I left out that happened in the beginning was, or earlier in the film, is it has to do with Hawkeye. Hawkeye has become Ronin because he lost his family, kind of like right in front of him, and he loses his shit and supposedly goes on a murdering spree, but he's murdering bad guys. He's murdering Yakuza, and he's murdering Triad people, and he's murdering cartel dudes. So it's like, who cares? Isn't that what you guys did in the first place? But apparently he's doing it with no oversight, so it's bad, and he's just killing. And so the Widow has to go and get him back, and the two of them go to Vormir, and on Vormir, pretty much Black Widow ends up sacrificing herself so that they can get the Soul Stone. It was a really well acted scene, but it felt kind of like, really? Like, there's no other way you could have gotten this. There's no way you could have tricked the fucking Red Skull. There's no, like, you're not from this time. How are you even here? You know what I mean? There's no, like, you're kind of fucking with the rules because you guys aren't from this time period. This isn't how things work type of situation. Instead, it was just like, yeah, come, you know, sacrifice somebody, something that you love so that you can get, you know, get these stones, get this stone, you know what I mean? And it just felt like, for me, it felt like there should be something else to this. You know, well acted sequence. Don't get me wrong. Sad sequence. Don't get me wrong. But it just felt like they could have done something more. How am I putting this? It seemed like the type of thing that could have been avoided in some way. Does that make sense? I hope you get where I'm coming from. It seemed like the type of thing that two world-class spies could have figured out a way around. You know, fake the death. Or, I mean, I guess maybe you couldn't fake the death. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about that part. Maybe it's just that I didn't see why. I didn't see that death coming. And it seemed like the way things were going, they would have had a different way to deal with it. It would have been cool if someone else went there, you know, and they sacrificed some other characters. It was just kind of a holy shit, that came out of nowhere kind of moment. And I guess rightfully so. So, you know, ignore my nitpick on that one. But the whole Ronin thing was wasted. It was one of those things where, if you know the comics, Ronin is a persona that a lot of the heroes have used to kind of hide in plain sight. Um, the idea is usually characters that have like really good martial arts skills can pretend to be this ninja type character, and villains and, you know, heroes alike don't know who's under the mask until it became more of a gimmick. You know what I mean? But most of the time, they don't know who's under the mask, so they can hide in plain sight and get away with things or do things that they couldn't do in their standard superhero persona. But in this movie, it was like just an excuse to make, to try to make, um, what's his name, cool. To try to make Hawkeye cooler. I like Hawkeye. Jeremy Renner is a fighter. He can fight. He does Kali and Arness. I want to see more of that. And back to what I said earlier about the showing, don't tell. So his big moment as Ronin to make everybody say he's cool and he's badass and blah, blah, blah. And they don't show you shit. He beats up like two guys and then goes into a room, and then they do the Universal Studios stunt tour bullshit where you hear a bunch of fighting and then you see the guy fly out the window, like in those old westerns where a guy goes into the saloon and you hear a bunch of punch sound effects and then the guy comes flying out the window. And then they didn't really follow it up with anything that awesome. It's like 5 seconds of fighting, maybe 10 seconds of, you know, Hawkeye doing cool shit. And it's not even that cool considering what he's capable of. And then we're done. And it kind of, it bothered me. I was like, yeah, this isn't how you treat this sort of thing. You're supposed to make this more epic, because this is the last one. So you're supposed to go nuts. And they didn't go nuts. So boo to them for that. But anyway, Thanos has attacked. He's knocked down the Avengers compound. And now Iron Man, Cap, and Thor stand ready to fight with the Mad Titan 2.0. Oh, another thing. Going back to the show us, don't tell us. Hulk. So in this movie, Hulk is essentially cured. He is the Professor Hulk. Smart Hulk. Doc Green, essentially, kind of. He's like the MCU version of Doc Green. And it's like the 90s Hulk. You remember in Marvel superheroes during that era? Essentially, that's what he is. So he's smart now. Him and Banner are like cool. So he's like dabbing and like he's like a real superhero now. He's not just the angry green monster. You know what I mean? And it's funny. To me, it was really funny. A lot of the fanboys hated this shit, man. There's all these videos going around YouTube talking about Hulk's fall from grace. Did you really think Hulk was going to walk up to Thanos and just beat his ass because he's angry? This is what I mean when I say a lot of people have no imagination. Yeah, you like the emo monster. I got you. But that doesn't mean that the story is going to make the emo monster, who really doesn't do very much when you think about it, he's not going to be the savior of mankind because he's just angry. That's it. That's not a very good superpower. You need to be smart. So I do understand some of the frustration where he doesn't do very much, but like narratively, he does some important shit. You know, he helps them figure out the technology so that they can do the time heist, he does the snap that brings everybody back. So, he's important just in a different way, just like Thor is battling an internal, fight. He's having an internal battle. The Hulk has already had his, and he's won it, and now he's using his powers to benefit as opposed to just destroying shit, It'll be kind of dope if they go the Joe Fix-It route the next time we see the Hulk, or if it'd be even doper if the next time we see him, he's no longer the Hulk, he's just Banner. That'd be actually kind of dope too. It's like he came full circle. Anyway, Thanos is ready to kill them. He's pissed. He tells what's her name to go get the Nebula to go get this, bring him the stones, and he's just gonna wait. And then when the heroes show up, he's gonna kill them. There's this big fight. Tony gets his ass whooped. Spends the majority of the fight on his back. He's wearing a new suit that looks like his comic book classic suit with the golden arms and golden legs. It doesn't really do anything special, which is another gimmick or gripe that I have with the gimmicks that are in these films. It's literally created so that all you Iron Man fanboys have another action figure to buy. And that's really it. And I know some of you are just super cool with that. So, I'm not dissing you. I'm just saying they should have done more. The suit should do something different. Trying to make him have nanotech because, Black Panther has nanotech is dumb. Make the suit do something. Go nuts with the creative things that concept artists can come up with for his suits. This is why I'm so angry that when Iron Man's whack-ass films, they didn't do Armor Wars. They should have done the Armor Wars because that was a great story and you could have tweaked things and made a really badass display of Iron Man's skill. And you could have also displayed a shit ton of Iron Man's armors. But apparently only I read Iron Man comics when I was a kid. So they have this big fight and they're losing. And in this fight, Thanos is able to withstand Stormbreaker without the aid of the Infinity Gauntlet, with all the gems. If you remember correctly, in Infinity War, he could not stop Stormbreaker with all 6 gems. Now, I've heard all kinds of bullshit theories and all this stuff, but this is where all of it falls apart. Nobody goes back and says, I watched a movie. And in the movie, this is what I was shown. Everybody's so hard up on talking about what their theories are and why things happened according to them, not according to the movie that we all watched. It pisses me off because it's like you really think that your bullshit concept, your bullshit idea and understanding of what happened is more valid than what actually happened on the fucking screen. I paid to see a movie. And in this movie, they told me a story, and in that story, things that I was told would happen did not happen. And now you're trying to explain to me why, and all you did is pay to see the same thing I saw? It doesn't work like that. They literally left out very necessary information, and it's problematic. It shouldn't be like that, but it's problematic. That's why it sucks. Film is a visual medium. You're supposed to show us. You're not supposed to just tell us. You should always show us first. It's okay to have verbal exposition every now and then with, okay, minute things, medium level things of medium level importance, things that are accents to the larger narrative elements of the story. The big shit-breaking moments should be things that we get to see, especially in these kinds of films. This movie has all these imbalances because it's trying too hard to be things that are not necessarily what this kind of movie is. It's almost like the Russos should stick to Captain America, maybe even making Iron Man films, and leave the people with the crazy imaginations like James Gunn and what's the guy's name who directed Doctor Strange? I gotta look that up because I always forget his name. And that guy, he understands the crazy cosmic level shit. You know, Scott Derrickson. You need people like him to handle the big reality bending shit because once again, the fight is just not that imaginative. All the fights are not that imaginative, except there is a moment where something happens. But I need to slow my roll and go back to elements of the fight that did not work, and we're supposed to just buy it because that's what we're told. Thor now has Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, and this version of Thanos easily beats Thor's ass like it's nothing. And I get it. You want to say because he's fat, fine. You want to say that it's because he's been through all this stuff, that's fine. But you know, like a lot of times when people have the argument about who would win if these two people fought, you have to remember that this is like bloodlust. This is like Thor with no remorse. He doesn't give a fuck. He's going to kill Thanos. And so is Cap, and so is Iron Man. They're ready to kill Thanos. So the fight should go differently, right? Nah, Thanos just beats the shit out of all of them like a Van Damme villain because it's written that way. And I was not feeling this. I'm still not cool with it. I think it's stupid. I think it does the whole everything a disservice because you can't just have Thanos be magically more powerful without having him earn it. It's part of the reason why we even watched the first movie is because he earned that shit. That's what made it cool to see him go up against everybody else, you know? He earned that shit. Now you're going to tell me he just magically is more powerful? Like, and he is more powerful, but not that powerful. You know what I'm saying? Like, he would have been a challenge, but make him work for it. Make him do things that make him look more badass. You know what I mean? Make his fighting style more of an epic kind of feeling fighting style. Don't just like bullshit through it. Give us a reason to be like, shit, that motherfucker is no joke. But that's not what we get. Instead, we get a very generic, very like he can do this because we say so kind of version of Thanos who's just so powerful, so ridiculous, and it's just stupid. But anyway, Thanos is beating the shit out of everybody. He's about to stab Thor with Stormbreaker, and then Mjolnir hits him in the head, or hits him in the back, and then it goes back to Captain America, and everybody lost their shit. Cap wields Mjolnir, and he beats the shit out of Thanos for a couple minutes, and then magically, just like a Van Damme movie villain, like old Van Damme movie villains, he beats Cap, breaks the shield, the whole nine. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, at what point are you guys gonna give props where, you know, they're due? When are you gonna change this whole shtick and make Cap actually allowed to kind of win, you know? But I don't know. That's one of those things that apparently is just me. But I won't say that I wasn't okay with the way things went because it felt like an earned moment that was set up a long time ago in Age of Ultron. And, you know, we knew, all of us who read comics, we know Cap is worthy. Cap has used Mjolnir on many occasions. But in this universe, they were waiting for a moment to make the audience be like, wow. And we shouldn't have been amazed because if anyone is worthy, it's Cap, you know? It's not even a question of who the worthiest of the Avengers actually is. It's stupidity if you didn't realize that Cap would be worthy. You know what I mean? And, you know, because it's definitely not Tony. It's definitely not Tony. I don't care if he sacrificed himself. It's not Tony, you know? But anyway, Thanos comes back from the ass whooping that Steve is giving him. and he breaks the shield, and he just beats the shit out of Cap for a couple minutes, knocks Cap down, and Cap is spent. He's just like, I can't fucking, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And he gets back up. He looks at his arm. The shield is cut almost in half, and he's got this big gash on his arm, and he tightens the shield to cut off the bleeding. Stands up and continues walking towards Thanos. Thanos is monologuing, and then in his helmet comm, you hear, Steve, are you there? Steve, are you there? And Steve is like, what the fuck? And he's like, on your left. And then you start seeing the sling ring portals popping up. You see one open up, and Falcon flies out of it, flies around the battlefield. And then you see Okoye, Shuri, and T'Challa walking through, and they walk up to Cap. Then you just see hundreds of them open up all over the place. And pretty much everyone who you've ever seen in any of these films. You see the Ravagers and all these ships and all these different dudes on the ground. The Guardians, you see, you know, Spider-Man and the team he was with. You see the remaining Asgardians in full regalia. You see Doctor Strange and Wong and a bunch of students of the mystic arts, warriors of the mystic arts, and Pepper shows up, and she's in her Iron Maiden gear, or rescue gear. Those of you who've been reading comics, you know who the Iron Maiden is. You see, who else? Wasp. You see Valkyrie on her flying, you know, Pegasus. And it's a pretty dope sight, because you see everybody. Ant-Man pops up out of the ground, holding Rhodey and Rocket. And except now he's like Giant Man, you know. It's a dope moment. And then Cap essentially is looking around just like, yeah, you guys are going to get it now. But then, of course, Thanos' people have shown up. And so then there's this big Lord of the Rings type moment where, you know, Cap is surrounded by his people, and they're looking down the battlefield at all of the enemies that they're about to fight. You know, Thanos, the Black Order, the Chitauri, all that shit. And then he gives the line we've been waiting for since the very first film, which is Avengers Assemble. And he gives it to us in a kind of a quiet kind of way, you know, Avengers Assemble. And then they just lose it, run down the battlefield, clash, and it's the most unimaginative series of battles that I think we could have gotten for this film, but I know it would work because the fan base has been trained to see mediocrity as, you know, groundbreaking. I mean, like, the awesome things that you see are like Giant Man punching one of those Chitauri flying whale things in the face. That's amazing. It's fun to see, and I loved it. He just one-shots it like boom, and it goes down like nothing. You see Black Panther flipping around, cutting stuff like he should be doing. You see Spider-Man swinging around. He has a cool scene where he goes into kill mode, and he's murking hundreds of Outlanders, and it's still not enough. There's, you know, scenes of Hawkeye jumping around doing stuff and, you know, shooting. And there's eventually this, I called it the rugby scene, where they are trying to play keep away with the Infinity Gauntlet. And everybody gets a chance to kind of do their thing. Captain Marvel shows up at the end. Actually, Scarlet Witch shows up first, and she's pissed. And we all know that Scarlet Witch is almost on par with Thanos. They got that right. She's almost on par with Thanos with the gems. She has, in this fight, she has no problem essentially almost killing Thanos. And then Thanos has the ships fired down on the battlefield, and his people are like, what about our soldiers? And he's like, I don't care, do it, because she's about to kill him. She's crushing him in his own armor. And they're shooting down at her. It's hitting everybody. Everybody's jumping the cover. People are getting blasted back. And then all of a sudden, the guns start aiming up. And they're like, why did it stop shooting at us? What's it shooting at? And you just see the bright light coming out of the sky. And, you know, for us, we know it's Captain Marvel. She flies right through Thanos' ship, brings the ship down, and then comes up to Peter Parker, and he's like, here, you know, there's a lot of guys over there, which is such a dumb line. She just one-shotted Thanos' ship, the whole thing, and brought it down. And Peter Parker is like, there's a lot of guys over there. I don't know how you're going to, I don't know what you're going to do to get through them. Did you not just see her come from space and smash a fucking spaceship with her bare hand? But, you know, apparently I'm the only person who notices these things. And then Okoye pops up, or someone pops up and says she's not alone, or she won't be alone. And all the girls stand up. And it's like, wait, why were all the girls just waiting over there away from the battle where all the dudes are fighting? It was their little girl power moment, and it didn't make very much sense, but you know why they did it. It was stupid, though. I was like, come on, guys, really? Really? That's what we're doing? That's where we're going with this stuff? Like, come on, guys. You can do better than this. But, essentially, they play their keep away almost like a team protecting the quarterback. Football, but the Thanos eventually gets his hands on the gauntlet, but Captain Marvel will not let him do the snap. And this is kind of a cool moment because instead of giving us the moment where she just wins the whole thing, we just get an example of how strong she is by having her opposite Thanos and showing off, how she reacts to what Thanos can do. Thanos tries to headbutt her. She doesn't even move. She just looks at him like, are you serious? And she's wrestling it from him. He has to take the power gem, absorb some of the power, and then he one-shots her out of the fight. She's gone out of the rest of the movie. You don't see her until the end of the film. So ultimately, during this fight, Iron Man asks Doctor Strange, "Is this the one where we win?" And he's like, "If I tell you, it's not going to happen." So when Thanos gets his hands on the gauntlet, Tony looks up at Doctor Strange, and he's like, the face is like, this must be it. And Tony, he kind of looks kind of scared, and Doctor Strange looks at him like, this is that one moment. He even puts his hand up, one finger, like this is it, that one moment. Tony decides to wrestle the gems away from, or the glove away from Thanos. Thanos throws Tony off, and then he snaps. And when he snaps, nothing happens. And then you see the gems fly towards Tony, and they all stick to his gauntlet. I was kind of like, come on. They stick to his gauntlet, and then when Thanos made his snap, he said, I'm inevitable, but nothing happened. And then Tony was like, I'm Iron Man. And he snapped, and then all of Thanos' forces, ending with himself, they all get ashed. They get dusted. And then Tony, you see this massive shock, because when the Hulk used it, it damaged his arm. Just like when Thanos used it, it damaged his whole side. And then when he used it again for the second time, it damaged him even more, which is what allowed the Avengers to be able to easily take him when they fought him for the second time. Tony, being a human, even wearing a suit that probably wasn't designed, I kept calling that the coffin, because, what else did he do? It didn't do anything. You'd think he would have built a suit that would have tried to help him survive. So he could have made the suit take the snap, and he could have jumped out of the armor. But I knew Tony was going to die, because that's the only thing that you could have hit this movie with, hit the audience with, to make Robert Downey Jr. happy. Because one of the things that a lot of really passionate artists, especially actors specifically, what they like to do when they play a character for a long period of time, or if they've played a character that they've always wanted to play, is they want to die as that character, because that way no one can reprise the role. They will have to, recast and start from scratch. Because usually when they die, they don't use that character anymore, So Tony dies slowly and peacefully. Peter is now in the position that Tony was in in the last movie. Pepper pushes Peter away, and she's like, "You can rest," and then he finally just falls off, and she's sad, and everybody's sad. And there's a big, memorial for Tony Stark, and you see everybody, even the kid from Iron Man 3, the mechanic kid. You see him there. You see Captain Marvel again, and they send his first arc reactor down a river on a wreath, and it's essentially, the next voyage for him. Steve, you see him wearing his full costume, and you see him walking with a briefcase. He goes and gets a briefcase. The stones are all in the briefcase with Mjolnir. Hulk, Falcon, and Bucky are all there to kind of see him off. And essentially, Cap is being sent to put everything back. And he kind of gives Bucky this kind of knowing look. There's a lot of that in this film, too. These knowing looks. He gives Bucky this knowing look like, I'm about to do something that I always was going to do. And everybody knows that I was going to do it, And they kind of give the kind of goodbye speech they always do, Don't do anything stupid. And he's like, I can't because you're taking all the stupid with you. And, he goes and looks at Sam, gives Sam a see you later type deal. And then he leaves. And then they're like, Cap didn't come back. What's going on? Cap didn't come back. And then Bucky points over across the lake, and there's an old man sitting there. And Falcon goes over to the old man, and you find out that it's Steve. So apparently, after he put everything back, he didn't come back. Which also would have created a completely different timeline in which he stayed with Peggy Carter, had a family, and did all kinds of whatever he did in that world. Instead, we're supposed to believe that he went back in time on this timeline and just stayed there and lived his life to that point. So he's actually old, he actually lived with Peggy Carter. It's like he interrupted this timeline. So the person she married would have still existed. It just doesn't make sense when you think about it because they overcomplicated a very simple but complex concept. But anyway, he gives Falcon his shield and is like, essentially, I don't need this anymore, and I think, you should have this. And so this is going to open up the floodgates for Falcon in the MCU to be the next Cap. Or maybe he'll continue being Falcon with a semi-Captain America motif. And then it ends with, Steve and Peggy dancing, getting that dance that he didn't get from the first Avenger, which I like. Because if you think about it, if we're being fair, because there's a lot of weird revisionist history when you look at the way these movies have been received, Cap has had a very consistently great set of films. Each film was better than the last, and they're all good films on their own. Whether or not you like the Indiana Jones-esque kind of feel of the first Avenger, then, it doesn't matter. It's still a solid film. If you don't like, or if you do love, which in my opinion, Winter Soldier is the best MCU film, hands down. It's consistent. I mean, if you get philosophical, that's where the issues go, or come from. But as a standalone film, it's pretty damn flawless, It's pretty close to the gold standard of what you want for the combat. It's pretty close to the gold standard of the understanding of the character. Captain America doesn't have an arc. The world around him has an arc, and he reacts to it because he's a man out of time. All his films show this. There's always a level to what he's going through and how he handles what's going on around him. And I love it. I love seeing this. It's what makes those movies the best for me. And they all up the stakes each time. I mean, think about it. Winter Soldier had him fighting Bucky as a villain. Then Civil War had him fighting his fellow Avengers. And it was ridiculous, you know. And then it had an explanation for why Bucky was doing what he was doing, but this explanation was going to splinter the whole damn team. It doesn't really get much better than that, you know. And a lot of people don't see this, they don't understand, but it's like, this is what makes those movies so good. And I don't know, I'm a fan. I've been a fan of that movie more than the others, but you see how the movies got better, whereas Iron Man's trilogy is pretty whack. You had Iron Man, which was an amazing film. Then you had Iron Man 2, which was this scatterbrained mess with some cool scenes in there. That kill box scene is amazing. And then you had Iron Man 3, which was this weird comedy, international man of mystery, like, still missed the mark. It had the tone, like some of the tonalities right. Like, Tony's attitude was proper. The jokes he made were proper, but it had all these things that just were like, nah. Like, he's going to give his address out on national television so that, like, enemies, villains, and everybody can come and attack his house? I don't think so. He does that in the film. It's like, no, that's kind of stupid. Or, you know, the Tin Man armor that kept falling apart. Like, no, that's not why it's modular. It's modular because he connects shit to the armor. He didn't do that. You had all those suits and he blew them all up, and all the suits were getting ripped apart by extremist soldiers. Like, there were so many stupid things in that movie. You know, he gets the arc reactor removed only to build another suit to have, you know, the same kind of setup. It just, you need an Iron Man that keeps his shtick. You know, him and the suits need to be connected. So it made sense for them to do what they did. You kind of rest the saga on Steve's shoulders, but you tie up all the loose ends. Or I'm sorry, you rest the saga, the ending, the resolution of the saga on Tony's shoulders. I'm sorry, and then you tie up all the loose ends with Cap. So that made me happy. They did Cap justice in this film. For many Tony Stark fans, they did him justice in there too. I don't think it was as big of a deal. It was kind of like, of course Tony could do all the things he did. I mean, just listen, in this film, Tony Stark builds a time machine, time GPS, the giant time vortex thing, time tunnel thing, the suits, and an infinity gauntlet. This motherfucker solved time travel and builds an infinity gauntlet within days of one another. Are you fucking kidding me? But then he can't build a suit that does something substantial enough to allow him to actually stand a chance against Thanos? Why do you guys like this guy? I don't understand. Like, he literally spends the majority of the fight on his back. You know, he comes out of space after almost dying, and the first thing he does is yell at Steve, you know? Ooh, I have a superiority complex because Steve is so perfect and muscular and blah, 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 and he's this, and I'm Robert Downey Jr., so I've got to be an asshole just because, you know? And the fact that so many of you fall in line with that bullshit, it's like, really? In the movie, Banner is like, this is the end of the world. Get over your stuff, essentially, and get Steve on the line. And he can't get over his shit. Meanwhile, he told him, he extended the olive branch. He's the one that gave him the phone. He said, if you need me, give me a call. The end of the world qualifies as a moment that you get over your shit. So, yeah, Iron Man is still an asshole. It just kind of, he makes up for it with the giant sacrifice, you know? Thor, they fucked up Thor, making him a goofball, but I think they're going to redeem it because they're having him go off with the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that's kind of cool. Gamora from, and I didn't mention this part because it was like, another one of those moments that should have been impactful from a science fiction perspective or a science perspective, but it wasn't. Gamora shows up with Nebula, our Nebula, because they escaped the ship, and they go to confront the past Nebula, evil Nebula. And she has the Infinity Gauntlet. She stole it for, well, she was given it by Hawkeye, who thought it was regular Nebula. And then when she's trying to escape with it, they're like, Nebula, don't do this. You don't have to do what he wants you to do. Um, you can make a different choice. And she's like, no, he won't let me. And she pulls her gun out. They shoot her and kill her. Nebula, our Nebula kills past Nebula. No repercussions whatsoever. Which is weird. It seems like it would do something. Wouldn't that create another timeline somewhere? It just seems really weird. But Gamora goes with, 2014 Gamora goes with our Nebula, and they go back to the Guardians. Thor goes along with them, and I think that's going to be cool if that carries over into Guardians 3. What's another thing that happens? I mean, I guess we got to see where Spidey ends up, which I don't care. I don't like. I'm not a fan of this Spider-Man. The Hulk. So, show, don't tell. Supposedly, like I said, he got over his shit. Him and Hulk and Banner became friends. They're sharing the same body, the whole nine, and we never got to see that moment where he overcomes his shit. So this is twice that profound things happened to him, although it worked better the first time when he showed up in Ragnarok. He got over something ginormous, and they don't really show us how it happened. They just tell you it happened. And it's like, we would have liked to see this because this is what makes, for your story. Instead, the film is so top heavy. It spends so much time with this oppressive tone in that first, hour and a half, something like that, where it's explaining to you how fucked up everything is now that half the population is gone, and how everybody's dealing with it, and everybody's going through something crazy, and everybody's life sucks because half the people die. And I'm like, I get it. We did just sit through a whole different movie. Why are you still pretending like that movie didn't happen? We sat through a 2 hour and some change film that established that this is where we're going. How do we end up here in this 3 hours film with an hour and some change dedicated to retreading that ridiculously, for some people, it was pretty traumatic to watch your heroes just die. You know what I mean? And you're sitting here beating us over the head with this information, and it's like, so yeah, couldn't you you could have cut that short, and you could have spent more time showing us, I don't know, the Hulk getting over his shit. Show us, what's her name was doing. I know people don't like her, but it would be cool to see what she was doing. Show us what Wakanda looked like in the absence of the Black Panther. So many other things. Show us Ronin on his killing spree. But instead, we don't get that. What's Rhodey doing all this time? Show us how he's coping with, losing the use of his legs and having to use that exo's frame for his lower half so that he can walk and stuff. Show us how that worked. Instead, they just want to show us this depressing and very cheap tone, or cheap scenes where it's just, the Avengers out of costume, doing a lot of pouting and crying, and not a lot of superheroic stuff. And it was like, they are superheroes at the end of the day. Trying to make this like a big budget CW show is not helpful. You want to talk about it? Everybody's sulking in a corner because something that's supposed to be emotional happened. That's not how you handle this stuff. This is a movie where it should have been on a cosmic scale. Think about this. In the comics, Galactus showed up, the Living Tribunal showed up, Adam Warlock showed up, Silver Surfer showed up. That's just a few people. Death showed up. They didn't do any of this shit. And it's supposed to be, this is the one where they go no holds barred. The end fight, you could have had things like Giant Man grabbing Black Panther after he's stored up a bunch of kinetic energy in his suit and have Giant Man throw Black Panther into, Thanos, and have him explode a whole bunch of the kinetic energy out as he impacts on Thanos' face with a punch. You could have had a whole scene of, the agile characters like Ant-Man, Wasp, Spider-Man, Black Panther, Okoye, have them flipping all over the place, dodging things and fighting at the same time. You could have had Hawkeye trick shooting and stuff. You could have had scenes where different bunches of characters are fighting together. And you play, they're using their abilities to play off each other. Remember, this is going to be the last time you're going to see a lot of these characters, and they didn't do that. And people said this last fight was like the greatest thing you've ever seen. Did you not watch Lord of the Rings? They were more imaginative in Lord of the Rings with these large-scale battles than they were in a movie where all these characters have different powers, which doesn't make sense, Where's the sequences where Wasp was going off, growing, shrinking, dodging, kicking people, punching, flipping, growing, shrinking, flying, dodging in and out of things, and then Ant-Man shows up and the same thing. Like, they didn't push any of that stuff. I was bored with that part of the movie. As soon as everybody else shows up, they forgot that Cap had Mjolnir. Really? There's a sequence where they try to make a joke about it, but it's like, shouldn't he still be going off the way he was going off when he was fighting Thanos? They're still trying to save the world from this idiot. But nah, none of that. There was no sequence where everybody attacked Thanos. There was no choreography between the Black Order and the individuals that they were fighting. Instead, you just watch a bunch of them get their asses whooped in the background, Really? You mean to tell me that no one could come up with some fitting choreography for these characters to show us what they're capable of? It just, all we got was Ebony Maw using his telekinesis to stop Black Panther from running away with the Infinity Gauntlet. That's it. Why didn't we have a sequence where he's throwing things at them, or he's trying to stop one guy and the other characters are jumping off the debris that he's throwing at the one guy he's trying to stop, meanwhile they're attacking him? Like, this is it. Doctor Strange. They made Doctor Strange occupied almost the entirety of the fight with stopping a tidal wave. If you saw Doctor Strange's films, and if you saw Infinity War, more so in his movie, he was bending reality without a reality stone. But after they pull him out of his films, he doesn't do that. I mean, in Ragnarok, he kind of did his, Sorcerer Supreme shtick where you just couldn't touch him. He, Loki tried to attack him and he was like, nope, sling ring, bye. And this is Loki, Why didn't he do any of this stuff on the battlefield when he's fighting this version of Thanos in this situation? Have him healing people, have him creating portals to redirect attacks, Where is the imagination? There was no imagination on display in this film past Cap using Mjolnir when he's fighting Thanos. Even Thanos just spun his sword around and just hacked things. He didn't really have a fighting style. And it was like, come on, this is where you get nerdy with that stuff. Every single character should have had their own way of fighting. Okoye should have had a fight scene against Horvis Glaive, where we quickly see how badass she is, where we have somebody come up with some insane martial arts movements with the staff to make us, with her spear, to make us be like, damn, she is a badass chick, you know what I mean? Like, she knows what she's doing. Nah, instead, it was just like she stabbed him and he's mortally wounded again. And that's it, And that, to me, that's not enough. There were episodes of Power Rangers that had all the characters show up and they did a better job, showing us all their skills or having each character shine. And, here we are in a several $1 million film, and they're not going to those lengths to give us the spectacle that we deserve. And at this point, I'm just like, no, that's not how this works. You got to do better. But judging from people's reception to this, it seems like that didn't matter to people. I say this, and then tons of people just are like, I was blown away. I'm like, by what? The fuck were you blown away from? Like, they didn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be different if they did something, but nah, they didn't do anything. But, you know, it is what it is. Um, I'm a stickler for a lot of things, and I like martial arts, and I like action. And in my mind, whenever I see characters with interesting power sets, the first thing that comes to mind is, how will this character fight? And, you know, after growing up in a world where I played Marvel vs. Capcom, and, you know, I played games like Devil May Cry and stuff like that, I want to see power sets and moves and weapons and what's the most imaginative way you could put this stuff to use. So when you have a movie like this, I need that level of imagination. Otherwise, I'm bored. And that was a problem here. There was a lot of like missed opportunities when it comes to doing awesome shit that could have really, like, you know, amazed the audience. But, you know, as it stands, it seems like most audiences were already amazed. So, you know, apparently it's just me. The time travel bullshit was by far the worst component to the film. It was as if whoever wrote this shit didn't think about what they wrote, and we just got what we got. And that's not enough for me. I needed it to make sense. I needed there to be some pretty tight reasoning for why things worked the way they worked, and I needed the movie not to forget the reasoning for why things worked the way it worked. So I was unimpressed with their time travel shtick. They should have stuck to the way it's worked in just about every other movie that's ever used time travel, or made it a multiverse story and focus on that. Otherwise, what was the point? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no point if that's the way you're going to go about doing things. So, yeah, I was pretty unimpressed with this movie as a you know, as a superhero film, and just in general. You know, it was like they took the easy way out on a lot of things that could have been more awesome. You know, and I wanted to see the awesomeness, and they didn't give it to me. You know, instead they kind of punked out, and I don't like that. So there are some cool things that happen in the film. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the film is worthless. I'm not even saying don't go see it. Go see it, see how it all wraps up. But don't join the hype train and start calling this the best movie of all time and all that shit. Like, nah, don't jump on the bandwagon with that nonsense. There's a lot of things that would need to happen for this movie to get that, you know, that title. It's not the best movie of all time. It's not even close. It's a milestone for superhero films because it's movie 22 in this saga, but it's not the best film of all time. It's not the best superhero film of all time. It's not even like, no. It's got to have a better story and more tighter, you know, storytelling to get this, you know, to get that honor. And it does not have that level of storytelling to have earned that. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. Movie lacked a lot of imagination. It dumbs down a lot of things that were set up in the previous film, Infinity War. And at the end, like, I didn't cry for anything. Nothing in here hit me because it all felt kind of artificial. And I know a lot of people said that, you know, the feels were real for them, and the hype, I think, got to so many people that they forgot to judge the film on the merits as a film. So, I don't know. That's how I feel about the film. So, you know, in the comments, as usual, get at me. Let me know what you think. And, yeah, that's it for me. You guys have been great. And until I do the next one with, you know, Clarion Prime and our resident Marvel fan, Agent O, peace outside.